in. There we go. All right. Kirsty, can you move to the next slide? All right, you guys. So I just want to throw out a little reminder. If anyone on the line isn't already a VIP coach or doesn't know about it, just a little reminder of our Support for Sport VIP coaching program. These specifics that are on the page right now are for our Nova Scotia program that we fully administer. But the exciting part is this program is now available in PEI. So if you're on the line, you're a PEI coach, make sure to talk to Lynn Boudreau. And there is movement of this happening in the other provinces. So Nova Scotia coaches, check this out. Check out the link. PEI, jump in with Lynn. And if you're from the other two provinces, keep pushing your coaching people. We're getting closer in those two provinces. Fire over to the next one, Kirsty. Yeah, so there's some images. Perfect. So getting into today's conversation. So again, this is what you would have seen online. So this is our Olympic coach series number 2, talking a little bit about Olympic experiences and expectations. We have Chad and David joining us. I'm going to dive into their bios. If you could flip to the next one. So this photo here is Chad Brooks. So a little bit about Chad. Chad was the head coach at Masqua Aquatic Club, so here in Nova Scotia, from 2006 to 2013, and has been involved with several committees of Canoe Kayak and the Atlantic Division Canoe Kayak Canada. He's been paddling with his family at Orenda Canoe Club, where he started, where he competed at several national championships and the Canada Games, and had a title in his name that stood for over a decade. CKC had the privilege of bringing Chad on board for the national coaching team in 2013, when his role was to support national team coaches with senior development men's kayak athletes and to develop and implement effective talent development programs. In 2017, Chad was named coach of the women's kayak national team, and he's coached at many national and international events, including the senior world championships since that time, and just got back from Tokyo. And can you flip to David? Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So David Kikuchi has been coaching since 1996. As a former 2-time Olympic gymnast in both 2004 and 2008, he has a passion for assisting other gymnasts to reach their full potential. David has grown up with a family full of gymnasts and coaches, and you may have heard or known of his father, who's a Hall of Famer, and they have ultimately inspired him to pursue his career in gymnastics. He's coached at the Commonwealth Games in 2014, and maybe another one since then. David, you'll have to update us, and the World Championships for many, many years, as well as multiple Olympic Games now that he's coached at, and he's the personal coach of Allie Black and was head coach of Canada's national gymnastics team. So those are our guests today. I'm very honored to be joined by both of them. You can just hang back, or actually let's stop sharing for a little bit, Kirsty. So David, you let us know when you want us to share your photos. Okay, I'm going to move us into speaker view. So for the recording, for those on the line, if you want to put yourself in speaker view, that way when Chad and David are talking, it'll pull up their faces so you can see who's talking to you. That would make the conversation better on your end. Also for everyone, as you have questions, type them in the chat. Kirsty and I can keep an eye out for questions as we go. And that way, we don't save them all up to the end, type them in as they go. So our plan for today is to ask Chad and David a couple questions, get the conversation going. And then again, we'll just sort of Chad and David, as you have things to share, let's do it. As we have questions come in, we'll roll through them as well. So I'm going to start it off with a fun and interesting fact about each of them. So let's start with Chad. What's a standout Olympic moment that you had as a child or a young person before you were an Olympic coach yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. So my upbringing out in Lake Echo, which is, I don't know if anybody has been there, but it's a pretty small town. But at the time, we really had a canoe club that was punching well above its weight, and in the late 80s, early 90s was the dominant club in the country, and won 3 national championships. And along with that came a few Olympians out of the club. Steve and Peter Giles, Leslie Ann Young, now Dempster, and Glenn Gerard as well. And 3 of these people lived on my street. So the leap to realizing that you could go to the Olympics if you just put in some hard work wasn't a big one for me. Maybe almost to the effect that I just thought it would be easier than it actually is, because my babysitter from down the street is also an Olympian, and So it was a real easy environment for me to dream big in, and really just kind of set me on that path of wanting to pursue the Olympics as an athlete originally. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and now as a coach. And that stuck with me for my whole life and continues with me now.
Thanks for sharing that, Chad. I love that. And that is true. Like for all the coaches on the line, I think it's an important message that the see them, be them. So you were surrounded by people who were inspiring you that, you can do this. So cool. Yeah. David, can you share with us an interesting fact before you were an Olympian?
Yeah, well, thinking back from when I was growing up and I watched the Olympics a lot, and the two memories that came up for me was both around sprinting, actually. So the first one was Ben Johnson, and so he won. It didn't end up turning out that good, but it was really exciting to watch at the time. And then with Donovan Bailey, I think in '96, just seeing Canadians be at the very top of the world, those two are really exciting. So that's what stuck out when I thought back.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, and Donovan Bailey, I remember that. And the '96 Olympics, I think that's when I fell in love with gymnastics, David. I watched that time and time and time again. So I love that. Awesome. So let's just keep going with David since you're off mute right now. So I'd like you to briefly share with the group what your Olympic experience was prior to Tokyo. So touch on a little bit as an athlete and a little bit as a coach.
Sure. I went twice as an athlete in 2004 and 2008. And then after that, I stopped competing to focus more on coaching. And initially, I was a men's coach only. But then we had one kind of standout junior athlete, Ellie Black. And so with some of my experience, I was helping out with her some leading up to the 2012 Olympics. And then she kind of surprisingly and at the last minute made that team. And so I was one of the coaches at the 2012 Olympics. And so I was just a personal coach at that time. And like the lowest on the totem pole. And so I didn't actually get into any of the trainings or anything. And I had to watch the competition from way up in the nosebleed section. So that was 2012. And then 2016, Ellie went again. And then at that time, I had been one of the team coaches. So one of the two coaches allowed out on the floor. And so it was a really different perspective that time. And then in Tokyo, I was going as Ellie's coach and also one of the team coaches, and then also the head coach for the team. So it's been different every time.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. You've built on your experiences. And I just want to ask, diving into that a little more, did your experience in 2012, at least being there, getting to talk to Ellie after the events, assist you with the next time in 2016?
Good question. That was in 2012. That was like the hardest thing for me. I think it was fine for Ellie not having me there, but having a young athlete with not much experience and then at the biggest competition of their life to not be able to be there and really help them. So I would go to training sometime, and then as they were walking from the training venue to the bus, I could see her a little bit then, and I got into the village a few times. But yeah, it was really difficult and stressful to watch. But yeah, the next year I became one of the team coaches. And so that was much easier from then. And it was, I had a lot of stuff to do. So it wasn't so hard just sitting around and hoping good things would happen.
Yeah, that would have been a tough experience, watching her from afar and, wanting things for her, but not being able to really work with her directly. Definitely hard. Chad, what is your Olympic experience prior to Tokyo?
Yeah, so I haven't been to nearly as many games as Dave, but in 2016, I was afforded the opportunity to go and be an apprentice coach at the Olympics with another coach from Nova Scotia. And it was a really good experience. When you're actually at the games, it's a lot different than when you're at home watching on TV. You have a much better sense of what's happening in the overall picture when you're at home. At the games, you're kind of in your bubble and locked in. So that games in Rio gave me the opportunity to go explore the wider games, go some different sports, some track cycling, some golf, I was kind of the chauffeur for some of our sports science people that had to be in multiple locations. So I found a new sport in driving in Rio traffic, which was a whole new experience, but it was quite exciting. So the whole process was just really good for me to go and experience that grandness of the whole thing, and without the pressure. And I saw my fellow coaches that were much more in it, and so I was able to play a bit of a lighthearted role because the stress was a lot less on me. And it really helped, I think, going into Tokyo, just to know what to expect. So it was an invaluable experience for sure, and it was something to kind of even stoke the fire a little bit more for, like, okay, next time you want to be here, you want to be the coach, and fortunately I was.
That's really neat. Yeah, that's fantastic that you had that opportunity. And it even makes me think of the value of our Canada Games apprenticeship program. So plug, coaches on the line, applications are open for that right now, but it's a similar experience. So talk to the coaches in your system. And it's true, getting to see what it's like from the inside, but without the pressure and all the expectation, that must have felt really nice.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah. So
And
let's keep
Natasha,
going on.
I just wanted to add something to what Chad said about being in the games. That's something that I find really different. Is that before I started going to Olympics, I would watch everything, and I knew everything about all the sports and every athlete and all the stories that were going on. In the Winter Olympics, they're still like that, but when I'm there now, it's like I don't know anything about what's going on. You'll get some like updates or see some pictures on the wall, like somebody did an amazing job, but it's just so focused on what we are doing as a team, and it's a different setting, but it feels just like a regular competition. But that to me, that's one of the biggest differences of being at the Olympics compared to watching at home, is just not really knowing anything about what's going on in the larger Team Canada.
That's interesting to share for sure. Because we sit at home. I sit at home during the Olympics, and I'm just fully immersed in the entire thing, as you said. Not realizing that, you're there at the games. You're so focused on what you're doing. You may not have a chance to have any idea of what's going on. That's very interesting. All right, Dave or Chad, we're going to get you to continue on. So we're going to dive into Tokyo. So now we're both into the Tokyo experience. Can you share with us what the year prior to the games was like for you as a coach with the announcement of the delayed games, and then share a little bit about how you think that experience was for your athletes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've all been through kind of this worldwide trauma together. But being so close to the games, we were in Florida training camp, kind of getting ready to do final prep for our trials for Olympic team. And, crew boats had just been selected, and all of a sudden we're packing up and going home. And, nobody knew back then how long. At first it was a couple of weeks and we'll be back at it. And, it kind of dragged on and on. And, even getting back on the water was hard because, like, you're going into the summer and you're supposed to be getting ready for this major thing, but now it's just back to basic training and, trying to work on the things that are going to make us better for a year from now. I think overall, like, as an organization, we handled it quite well. I mean, plan A and plan B rarely ever worked. It went down to C or D or E or F. And, including things like a big change for us last year was our winter training location. So we ended up having to go to BC because we couldn't get into the United States. And I don't know if anybody's been to BC in the winter. It's nice, but it's not great for kayaking. Especially when a polar vortex descends on you and it snows for 4 days straight. We have pictures of us heating our boats up over an open fire because parts were stuck in it because it froze from the night before. And so it was just a whole new experience. The fact that we all went through it together, I think, did create some resiliency and just, looking at what really matters. But when I look back on it now, it's a bit of a traumatic experience. And even if I mention where we were in BC last year, you can see the athletes kind of shudder because they were all kind of locked into a boarding school, eating in a cafeteria style setting. It's none of it was perfect, but we made it work. And I think we come out stronger for it. But at the same time, right now we're in the process of kind of relearning how to be full-time athletes with all of the the face-to-face meetings that stopped, and just kind of getting back into what we were doing well before the games. Again, I don't think it hindered performance all that much. Maybe there was a few aspects where it would have been ideal, but it was quite the year. When we had that lockdown in June, I had some athletes out of the province and we couldn't get them back. So next thing I know, I'm thinking I'm at home until the Olympics essentially, and now I've shipped off to Quebec, and I spent about 8 weeks in Quebec City and Montreal unexpectedly before the games, which is not great when you have a 4 and 8-year-old at home. So it was a hard experience for sure. But I keep joking with our team manager that like planning now should be so simple, right? It's, if you can run with plan A, then it's so easy. But as we're seeing, it's still dragging on a bit. And even at this point, we're trying to decide where we're training this winter. But my vote is for somewhere with flip-flops, not winter boots and toe warmers.
No kidding. The open fire thing made me laugh. I'm glad I was muted. That's wild.
It was crazy.
Okay, thank you for sharing that experience. And to any of the coaches online, reflect upon your own experiences. I hope they're a little more positive. Good for you, Chad, for getting through that. And yeah, I've been to BC in the winter, but I would never even think of going near the water. So, all right. David, yourself. So can you share with us what was the year ahead of the games like for you and for Ellie specifically?
Yeah, it was really a tough thing to be at the beginning, and then the uncertainty, and then Canada pulled out of the Olympics first, I think, and so that was a big deal. Like, what if they go ahead and Canada just doesn't participate? And then the whole thing got postponed, which was kind of a relief. And then, but we had like our more likely athletes, we had 2 of them who were planning to go off on scholarship right after the 2020 Olympics. And so they had to decide what to do with that. And so they ended up postponing. And yeah, and when it got postponed, the age eligibility rules shifted. So a new year of athlete was suddenly eligible that wasn't eligible before. And we had another athlete who had a strong chance to make it, and then had some injuries and wasn't able to even attempt to do it. So it was really hectic and difficult. And with all the lockdowns everywhere, that was difficult, and it was different in every province too. And so we've got people all over the country doing different stuff. For Ellie, she was able to get some exemptions after a while, but it was hard because it was just her in the gym and me, and then like one other rotating coach in there, just to have 3 people. But it was hard, especially at the beginning, those first few months when there was nothing concrete to work towards. And so that was definitely different. And so it was a really tough time for everybody, and especially the ones who had different plans that had to get put off. But it did require us to make some new innovations kind of as a national program. So we started having more Zoom stuff. So athlete meetings every 2 weeks or so, coach meetings, just to have some contact. And, we put some athletes in contact with each other to do some conditioning work and stuff like that. And so more communication and more contact than we're used to online. And then the different rules across every province made it impossible to have in-person competitions because our stuff is all inside, and different quarantine rules and whatever. And so our first actual competition was the Olympics, actually. And so it was, our athletes went there and they hadn't competed for a year and a half. And one of them, like our youngest one, who just became age eligible when the Olympics got pushed back, they had never been outside of Canada to compete. And so this was their first ever international competition, and it was the Olympics. And so it was really really difficult. And we were the only country like that who hadn't done any real in-person competitions, but with our rules across the country, we couldn't do it. Gymnastics Canada decided to back out of Pan Am's, which was in June. And that had an Olympic spot on the line, and we had a good chance at it, but they were in Brazil, and Brazil was really a terrible place to go at the time. So that was really difficult. But yeah, we did figure out how to do some virtual competitions across the country. So we ran 5 or 6 of those probably. And so that's a big part of how we did select our Olympic teams. But everybody was competing in their own gyms on video, and that got sent in to Ottawa altogether and got judged from there. But that kind of thing will come in handy sometimes in the future, and so I'm glad we were able to figure that out. And if we didn't, then we wouldn't have anything at all. But yeah, so we had some new innovations because we had to, but the whole thing was really difficult for sure.
Yeah, and just a question. I actually have 2 questions for you, David. I loved watching the documentary that was done on Ellie, and it sort of goes through that year and talks a bit about a couple of the athletes' experience. What was the name of that? So other
Up in
people
the
want to
Air.
check it out. Up in the Air. Okay,
And
so
that was
coaches
a
on the
CBC
line.
documentary that they started in the middle of 2019, when the World Championships in 2019 in the fall were the qualifiers for the Olympics for the teams. And so they were leading up to that, and then we qualified, and then it was supposed to go 1 more year to the Olympics, but it ended up being 2 more. So yeah, it was really cool to be part of that and to see it at the end.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't checked that out, Up in the Air, it was really good to watch, and it does really show parts of that experience, that extra year for sure. And then David, that young athlete. So again, that athlete who'd never traveled outside of Canada, how did you manage that at the games? Like, what was her experience like, and how did you work with her to get her through, hello, here's the Olympics?
Yeah, so we did as much as we could beforehand. And so we had meetings, and just like, she was a junior before, and she wasn't a particularly strong junior. And so she wasn't, up with those top teams and those top athletes. So she had never really gotten to know any of those athletes that were on the team. And really the other athletes on the team were like superstars of Canadian gymnastics. And so to jump onto a team with them, I'm sure was intimidating. But we did, as much as we could contact wise, and just trying to get her comfortable and talking about just the Olympic experience and what kind of things to expect. And yeah, she comes from a gym with a strong reputation for having top athletes, and her coach is one of the best, and so that helped for sure. And one of her teammates at her gym was one of them who had a strong chance to make the team, but then had some injury problems, and so that was a good link as well. And yeah, just trying to get some of the other athletes to just be aware and to keep her in mind and involved and part of the group, and trying to keep her comfortable. And the athletes really did a great job with that.
Nice. That's awesome to hear, because that would have been a rough experience for her as well, or scary experience for sure. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was only 15 at the time of the Olympics. So for
Imagine
gymnastics,
that.
you have to turn 16 during the year sometime to be age eligible. And so she was really young. And then at this Olympics, the rules were, as soon as you were done your competition, your own personal competition, you had to leave like within a day or 2. And she didn't have a great competition on the first day, and so she didn't make any finals or anything like that. And so she was supposed to go home, but since she was 15, we had her there with somebody who was named as her chaperone. And since she couldn't go home by herself, then she was able to stay as long as everybody else. And so got to experience a lot more of the Olympics and the different competitions and be a part of that. So that's
fantastic.
A much better learning experience and experience overall for her than it would have been just to compete and then go home right away.
For sure. Okay, glad to hear that part for sure. Chad, I'm going to throw it over to you. So speaking a little bit about once you actually arrive at the games, what were the first few days settling into the village like? And did it meet you and your athletes' expectations of what the Olympics or the COVID Olympics would be like?
Yeah, I mean, generally in our sport, we don't stay in the Olympic Village very often. Often our venue is a bit outside of the city. So this was a different experience for us as an organization as well. So, a lot gets made of it beforehand, and we do our best to talk about it and what to expect, and especially like you said with the COVID rules this year, there was a little bit more to take into effect. Um, Mind you, as a coach, knowing that my athletes couldn't go out around the city and potentially get into some sort of trouble, that was kind of nice because we were locked into the village or the venue. But I know after a few days we had a team meeting and we talked about the experience and try to be as open and honest as we can. Is anybody feeling overwhelmed? But I think to a person, we all felt like we settled in really nicely. I think Team Canada does a really good job of taking care of us when we're there as well. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly a cool experience to look over and see Yao Ming with his knees not fitting underneath the lunch table, sitting there eating dinner beside you. So it's a little surreal, but at the same time, you quickly realize that all these people that you watch on TV all the time are just people. And it became a pretty fun experience overall. So yeah, I don't think it was overwhelming by any means. And I like that we were there. I think we were there about 5 days before we competed. So lots of time to settle in and kind of get our feet under us. So overall, that part wasn't really a stress for us. And, I had been warned that it might be, and maybe in a different Olympics where you could socialize a little bit more and there was more things happening kind of within the village atmosphere, maybe it would be a bit different. But, we had some rules that like other countries didn't as well. Like we were just not using the Olympic gym. We were trying to limit the amount of time we were kind of exposed to anybody else. And yeah, so I mean, overall, it was a fairly smooth transition in there and enjoyable too.
Good, that's great. And Chad, just a little bit about your team, and then David, I'll ask you the same with those expectations of the game. Was most of your team coming with Olympic experience or without? Because I think it's a different experience to David's point. If you haven't been and you arrive, that's your expectation. It is what it is. But if you've experienced previous Olympics, it might have been a different experience for those athletes.
Yeah, specifically within my group, only one of my athletes had gone to the Olympics previously in 2016. So we didn't have a ton of experience, and wider on the whole canoe kayak team, we only had 2 athletes. So Mark DeYoung being one of those. So we didn't have a ton of experience going into this games from our athletes. It's hard to say whether we would perform better if we had, because you don't know. But overall, I didn't see it as a huge detriment, but I know the person on our team was able to provide some perspective. Like, even going in, some of the athletes were like, I'm not really that nervous. Like, it's whatever, and like David mentioned earlier, we hadn't competed literally in 2 years, almost to the day, against anybody internationally. Our qualifier was also set for Brazil, and the president of the Canoe Association in the Americas died in that city from COVID. So we decided it was not a great place to go. And then they ended up canceling the whole thing. So we actually missed out on qualifying. We had 5 spots and we missed out on qualifying the 6th. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing was kind of crazy, but overall, I think that experience was helpful, but there wasn't a lot of it within our team.
Yeah, for sure. And David, I'll throw that over to you. How was the experience different for those on the team that had been before and this games?
From our 4 athletes, we had 2 this was their first time, and 2 who had been to previous Olympics. And for me, I was surprised that it felt as normal as it did. There was like masks mostly everywhere, and there's hand sanitizer and people were following precautions. But other than that, like it seemed pretty normal. And I know like leading up to it, we had been really careful in Canada, and we had a couple of training camps in bubbles, and just like being so careful with everything. And then on the airplane, like all the list of different strategies to stay as safe as possible. And we had a pre-camp at a different city in Japan for I think about 5 days before we moved into the village, and we were just allowed in the hotel and on the bus and the gym, and so you couldn't go for a walk, you couldn't do anything outside. And so when we got to the Olympics, like the village is pretty big, and so being able to just be outside and move around was definitely nice. The cafeteria was an adjustment the first couple of days for sure, because after being so careful all the time and trying to stay away from people, the cafeteria was just like a huge mash of people all the time. And you had to wear gloves to get your like plastic gloves to get your food and wash your hands before and everything. But it was just a lot of people all in one place, which we hadn't been used to. So that it took a couple of days to get used to that, and then that was normal. But yeah, for the most part, I was surprised with how normal it felt. And yeah, which was nice.
Yeah, that's so good. And I can imagine too, walking into that cafeteria the first time for you and your athletes going, whoa, like, it's like that first time we all went to the grocery store after lockdown, that experience of, oh, people. Scary. Okay, I'm going to bounce it back over to Chad. Can you share with us how the actual event went for you? What are some of your highlight moments while you were there? And what learnings did the experience give you that you'll now integrate into your coaching?
Yeah. Overall, again, like I said, we hadn't competed in 2 years in our sport because it's outdoors and different waters, faster than other places. We just, you can use the stopwatch, you get a sense of where you are, but until you line up and race people, you really don't know. Which made it difficult going in because things were tracking in the right direction. I was very positive. We were in Montreal, which is a nice place to train right before a major competition because I can be right on top of the athletes there. But you just never know, and you don't want to tell yourself any false stories going in, like you're better than you are. But at the same time, you want to be confident. And so when we went in, I would say the results we ended up having, where we made a final in K1. And the second person in that event was also very close to making that final. But then we didn't make the final in K4, which was kind of what we had been geared up the whole quad around, or I guess quint around the K4 and trying to make that as good as we could. It was a little surprising. But at the same time, we did better than we did at the last World Championships. So we were happy overall, but it still left us with that feeling of wanting more. And, that's kind of the crossroad we're at now. A lot of the athletes I took over with in 2017 were probably a bit young for the world stage. And, over a 5-year period, all of a sudden you have to start looking at like who's going to retire and who's not. And with our world championships being in Dartmouth next year, it's definitely encouraged a few athletes to hang around and kind of see where it takes them till then, and then they'll make a decision. But overall, I mean, we had the results, I thought, just maybe not in the races, I thought. So it wasn't a great surprise, but at the same time left us wanting more for sure.
And what do you think that you will take away from this experience and do with your current coaching with either that group or, your next group?
Yeah, I think, you go through, well, I shouldn't speak for anybody else, but I went through a period of getting home from the Olympics and trying to shut the whole thing off, like just completely shut it off, come home, be a dad again. As a high performance coach, we spend a lot of time away. And so when it came time to start processing it all again, at first I was confused, and then like maybe we didn't do as good of a job as we thought, like the results aren't what we want. But overall, I think we kind of, sitting down with the support team that I have at the sports center, and really analyzing where we inherited these athletes to where we brought them. We were pretty proud of the overall work. And I think really it just makes us want to double down on doing things even better. I'm very blessed to have a great team out of the Sports Center in Halifax. And, it just makes me want to do more of what I think is high performance coaching and high performance sport. And that's working with a team to be collaborative and trying to solve issues. Like I have a very motivated athlete who wasn't on the Olympic team, but, would likely be in line around the next time. And we're just seeing some stagnation in her progress. And it's so great to be able to sit down with a group of people that want to help you and try to figure out, okay, like this is working for A, B, and C, but it's not working for D. Like, how do we change this process? And so just going back to, doing what coaches do, right? And really just trying to grind it out and figure out how to get that half second here or half second there. So I guess in the end, it just made me more determined to want to, not be a B finalist country in our sport, which is nothing to be ashamed of, but, you always want more. And when you see people on the podium and basking in that glory, you just want that for your athletes so bad. So.
Sure, I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, Chad. David, slightly different question for you. So Ellie had a tough injury with timing in the competition right in Tokyo, which is what we'll talk about now. How did you handle that situation, and what decisions were you having to make in those days between qualifications and finals?
So actually before we left, so at the end of June, Ellie sprained her ankle, like a kind of a medium level sprain. So she was off of it for about 2 weeks. And so when we were in our final training camp in July, by the end of that, she was able to do all of her stuff. And so then we went to Japan and to the other city first, and then things were going well. And yeah, everything was fine leading up to the competition. And so she competed on the first day, and she made it into the all-around finals and the beam finals. And so maybe 2 days after that, in practice, she had a beam dismount that didn't go well, and she landed quite short and re-sprained the ankle worse than before. And so the all-around competition was maybe 2 days after that, so that was out of the question. But there was about a week between the injury and the beam final, and so it was really tough, because it wasn't a great situation to be in. I don't know if you guys saw any of the pictures after, but her ankle was really swollen and black and blue everywhere. It was not looking good. And so luckily we had 2 great physios there. Our lead therapist, his name is Jean-Francois Mathieu, and so he's the lead of the national team, so he was there. Then also Martha Purdy, who is one of the other physiotherapists with our national team, but she lives in Halifax, and so she works with Ellie in the gym twice a week. So she was there as well, which was great. And so they worked along with Ellie around the clock for that week, and used every tool they had in the Team Canada medical area. And so from the time of the injury, maybe 3 or 4 days later, she started being able to do some stuff, and then with a really heavy tape job. And so by the end, maybe 2 days before, she went through a first attempt at the routine and got through. We changed two things that we took out and replaced it with something a little bit easier, just because those would be the hardest 2 things on her ankle. But yeah, she got through it. And then one process we did, and it's a physical thing, but it's also a mental thing. And knowing you have a pretty substantial injury and then an important competition in a week, it can get overwhelming. And so I made a kind of a list of all of her different skills in her beam routine, and then the different steps that she would take along the way before doing the full skill. So maybe doing something on the beam. Before that, you might do it on the beam with a little mat on top for a softer landing. And before that, you would do it on the floor. And then before that, you do it on the floor with a softer mat. And then before that, there might be a couple other little drills you would do first for it. And so for each of the skills, there was maybe 5 or 6 steps. And so through the week, she was going through those steps with each skill so she could really see and feel that she was making progress. So even though they weren't ready at the beginning or the middle of the week, she was moving towards that. And so that was really helpful for her as well. And so when she could take another little step, that was motivating and made her happy and feel that, you know, she was at least moving somewhere. So that's something that worked really well during that week. And so that plus all the medical attention, and like she was waking up probably twice a night to do game ready. So for the people that don't know, there's like a machine where you put in ice water, and it's and then you like a wrap around your injured area, and then it like cycles the ice water through as well as like contracts around the injury. And so it's like icing and squeezing at the same time and whatever. So she was doing that like every, I don't know, 4 hours or something. So having to wake up in the night to do that and whatever. So it was really an around the clock recovery job, but it was enough. And so she went, and it, you know, this Olympics was hard for Ellie just because of, well, one, it was the Olympics and then COVID and everything, but she really had big goals for this one. And the goal of the program was to win a medal. And so you could see that she had so much pressure that she felt on her shoulders. And so maybe one good thing about this injury is that took a lot of it off. And so it wasn't about performing at a certain level or achieving a certain result. It was about, can I at least go attempt it or participate or, you know, go try my best. And so the focus changed, and that part was easier. And she competed in the beam final, which was a victory in itself. And she had been at the World Championships. She had been in the beam final lots of times, and most of it hadn't gone well. And it really close to a medal a couple of times. And then so this time she was, of the 8 athletes, she was up very first. And she went and she did a great routine, and especially considering everything she had gone through. And so she made it, and she was, so happy and proud of herself. And the rankings didn't matter too much, the score, the placings. And then the next 2 athletes both placed ahead of her. So she was in 3rd after 3 athletes, and it seemed like, okay, so she did a routine. It wasn't her full difficulty routine, but she did it. It did a good job, so great. But then the next 4 athletes were all below her. So she was still in 3rd with the very last athlete. And so then it became really nerve-wracking. And then the last one ended up doing a great routine and was the winner. And so she got bumped down to 4th just at the last minute. So that was a pretty tough way to place 4th, I guess, when you've got a building chance right up to the end. But for sure, the main story was the comeback from the injury and being able to compete when it counted.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, David. That's incredible to hear what it was like, you know, sort of start to finish in it. And I really love that you shared the experience of how you got her through that week of injury and sort of the checklist and breaking down the skills, because I think that's something that any coach right now could apply if they have an injured athlete or even an athlete struggling to, say, achieve a certain skill in our skill-based sports, is breaking it down and giving the checklist. It sounds like it could have been motivating for any of them. And did you find with Ellie that at least gave her something else to focus on? You know, she wasn't focusing on the outcome of getting to compete in the finals, but she was focused on creating and completing the little steps along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And she's somebody that likes to be successful and be achieving something. And so to give her, so many different things that she could achieve. And so even like running was something, or like jogging on the floor, or doing like a little jump. Those were all things as, okay, there's one. And I think there was like 60 items or something. And so every day I was like, okay, well, we'll try and get to 10 today, and then tomorrow we'll try and get to 15. And then there was some times where she jumped ahead a little bit with the physio's blessing and whatever. And so she was like extra happy with that when she was ahead of schedule. And something, yeah, knowing her and knowing she would like that, sometimes I would schedule things on the conservative side a little bit to give her the room to go past a bit, because I know that that's really helpful for her.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. Chad, what about coaching at the Olympics do you wish you knew 10 years ago as a coach? So let's see, 10 years ago, where were you? You were still club coach.
Yeah.
2011. Yeah. So
really,
what do you wish you knew in 2011 that you know now?
Well, first, I just want to say, having known Ellie a little bit from being in the gym and sharing a strength coach, my favorite moment of the Olympics as a fan was seeing her come off the floor and give David that hug, just that relief of being able to finish that routine. I mean, I've heard from multiple massage therapists that Ellie is the toughest person to tolerate pain in the world. And I mean, I saw that picture of her ankle from your training, and the fact that she was able to get up there, it all blows my mind, honestly. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
But in terms of what I wish I knew now, geez, should probably write a book. But honestly, coaching at the club level and coaching at the national team level, it's almost like two different jobs in a lot of ways. You go from an environment where the club really takes the form, I think, or the personality of the coach. So you get a lot of like-minded people pushing in the same direction. And then you come into a national team and you have these different training thoughts and techniques and drills. And I'm sure it's the same in gymnastics. You have your old school Eastern European coaches, you have, some more softer touch people. And it's this amalgamation of athletes who have had these different experiences and trying to bring them into one program and getting them to buy in. I think, honestly, in terms of a training plan, it doesn't really matter what I write on paper if the athlete doesn't believe in it. Because if they don't believe in it, they're not doing it to their fullest extent. So the biggest thing is really, it's not a technical thing. It's not a new knowledge on physiology. It's really just how to handle and manage people. And I don't want to sit here and pretend like I haven't made lots of mistakes, because we have. And it's one of those things where I pride myself in being able to have a negative interaction with somebody and repair that relationship. And that's happened so much over the years, whether it be another coach, even a parent, an athlete. But the more we just try to realize that not every person is built exactly the way we are, then the more we can kind of, get away from our ego a little bit and really just try to figure out what's going to make the athlete better, not just performance wise, but just as a teammate as well. And again, I see the parallel for gymnastics, where we're an individual sport, but we also race in teams as well. So, I have athletes training together that are trying to pursue international goals, but first they have to make the team. So first they have to beat the people that they're trying to train with to make that international goal. And that dynamic can be tricky. And one of the things that we really tried to do over this past quad was actually create a team, not just a bunch of individuals that train together. It's one of those things where the moment you think you got it all sorted out, something's going to come up and grab you. And so just the idea that you don't know everything, and that, you think you want to be the best coach in the world, but really in the end, you have to be the best manager of personalities in the world for all that to kind of come together. And that goes from, your bosses in your organization to other coaches, to athletes, to parents, to everybody involved. And it can be tiring, but it's also the challenge that I like about it the most. And you'd asked me 10 years ago, it would have been like, I need to get better at writing training programs and teaching technical pointers. And that stuff's all super important, don't get me wrong, but I don't think any of it works if you don't know how to bring people together to be a team.
I think that's a phenomenal message, Chad, and especially from where you're sitting as a national team coach. So I really appreciate you sharing that with our whole group. David, I'm going to turn it over to you. What about coaching at the Olympics do you wish you knew 10 years ago as a coach?
Yeah, everything that Chad said really resonated with me too, and all the different types of personalities and different expectations and coming from different viewpoints. But I think to me, it's I feel like I would have liked to know, or I want other people to know that it's not that far from where you are, I guess, or like from what Chad said before about growing up on the same street as Olympians, that makes it easier. But I think for a lot of people, whether it's Olympics or just some level that they haven't gotten to yet, it seems like something extra special or, you know, unattainable, or like a certain secret upper level that you don't know how to get there. But it's not really like that. So whether you're, you know, trying to get to nationals for the first time or some kind of international thing or the Olympics, it's just the same process, just at a higher level. And so, you know, if you don't have the knowledge, or you don't feel like you have the knowledge to help get your athletes there, there's a lot of people that do around that are, you know, available, and whether it's your sport or another sport, but it's, you know, it's more possible than you think it is. And yeah, and that goes for any level that you haven't been to yet. And, you know, there's some people who are more aggressive with it than others, and some people, yeah, who are really, you know, intimidated by the next step. But it, you know, you don't have to be, and you don't need to know all the answers, and you just need to be wanting and willing to go find them and put it into practice.
Yeah, I equally love that message, David, and very motivating to all our coaches on the line. And the point about reaching out too, you know, for all of our coaches, that's why we're trying to create these communities and open some opportunities for conversations. So hopefully you feel, you know, you're starting to recognize some names, and that those reach out opportunities are certainly available. I'm going to open it up for questions, and then also open it up to you, Chad and David, to add anything that you want to for our coaches. So those on the line, if you have questions, please type them in, or put your hand up, and we can have you go ahead. And Chad and David, in the meantime, do you have anything to add?
I actually have a question for David, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, go. That's fun.
Yeah. So David, you guys did pre-camp in Japan, and I know at many points through the quad we had planned to do the same, but it became a little bit cumbersome with the planning around COVID. Do you think, and you can talk about other Olympics too, do you think that's generally a good idea, or would you have preferred maybe just to go straight to the village and get more settled there?
I think it was good. And one, for the time change and getting used to that. And then another thing for, I don't know what it's like with other sports, but in gymnastics at the camps beforehand. So we had our first camp since COVID in June, and we had our 4 team members, and we had a traveling alternate, and then there was 3 non-traveling alternates. So we had 8 athletes altogether. And then that was only a short camp. Then we had another camp in July when we left from there to Japan, and we still had those 8 athletes there. And then I find with Olympics, it's always kind of a strange thing to drop athletes along the way as you go. So going from those 8, there was only 5 that went to Japan. And then once our pre-camp was done, then it was just the 4. But I think the time at the pre-camp was important for those, I guess, then at that point, 5 athletes to kind of just be together with just them and enjoy that, you know, we're here in Japan going towards the Olympics, and getting used to that, and then getting some training in, and then being able to move to the village ready to go right away, and not being, you know, so tired from travel. And, you know, the travel was so difficult. Like we were in Montreal, and I think we went to Toronto and then to Tokyo, and it was 6 hours in the Tokyo airport, doing different tests and showing paperwork to 20 different people and all kinds of apps on your phone and all kinds of stuff. We had to get tested there, wait for the results. And then after that, we took a 5-hour bus ride to our other city. And so it was really long. And then we had to take our bus ride back to Tokyo. And so if we had done all that stuff and then had to be in the village and going right away, it would have been hard. And gymnastics always happens right at the beginning. So like the day after opening ceremonies is our first competition. So there's not too much time beforehand. And the time you were allowed in the village either before opening ceremonies or before your competition was limited this time as well. So it was good that way. And actually I just got back from Tokyo again last night. So I was at the World Championships, which the other host had canceled. So Japan took that on as well. And so, it was the same thing, like in the airport forever and so many apps, and where it's so much easier to come to Canada than it is to go to Japan. But so I have recent experience in traveling through Japan.
As a second week sport, I want to thank all you first week sports for getting that airport arrival time down from 6 hours to 2 hours in our case.
Yeah, it was.
We were hearing nightmare stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And David, also thank you. I didn't realize you just got back. Like I knew you'd been traveling.
No problem.
But, thank you for being awake and joining.
I'm feeling pretty good right now. In a couple of hours, I will not.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we nailed this. We do have a question from a coach that I want to make sure I ask. So John Elliott, who's one of our excellence coaches in volleyball, has asked, personal development plan for each of you. What's one thing as a coach you're looking to learn more about or personally improve on in the next year? Personal coaching, mental, physical, technical, tactical. The floor's open.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is to continue working on leadership skills for myself. We recently hired a coach that we had with us a few years ago. He's a German that was coaching with us for a couple of years, and he's one of a lot of people would say he's the GOAT of canoeing in the world. And we developed quite a close personal bond as well when he was here. And then he went back to Germany for a year and coached there and coached their Olympic team this year. But he's about to come back. And so he's going to come live in Halifax this time, which is much better for him and for us. So we're about to set up a real training system between him and myself and another coach that we're about to hire to help support us. So those kind of interpersonal skills, again, are going to be so important into what we do here and being able to work as a team. So really want to work on that. But the other thing I'm really trying to strive for is trying to figure out how to incorporate the technology that we have better into what we're doing, but also go out and pursue some things. We've, along with my performance analyst and biomech guy, Josh, we're working on some plans of some ideas that we've had for a long time, but we're going to try to test them out now and figuring out how to do those sorts of things without interfering with training, but also making sure that you're still on the cutting edge of really trying to find that quarter of a second here or there is kind of my goal. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, but the two kind of overlap a lot too, I think.
Cool. I love that. Thanks, Chad. And David, yourself.
I don't really have a good plan for that. It's just been pretty crazy, like just leading up to the Olympics and trying to get through that, and then having world championships, and then with my own job, there's so much up in the air, and working with the club and working with the federation, and it's pretty unknown what is going to happen for me over the next couple of months and what my role is going to be. And it's all complicated. So mostly I'm just trying to survive this before I and figure out what my situation is going to be before I can focus in and figure out how I'm going to get better at whatever it is I'm going to be doing.
You know what? Thanks for the honesty there, David, because that is the life of a lot of coaching situations. So I'm glad you just openly shared that. And hopefully your personal development plan will be building in some rest for yourself soon as well. So you have that time.
Hopefully.
Yeah. All right, coaches, I'll give you a last chance online. If you have any other questions, you can throw them in now. But I really want to thank both you guys for having this conversation. I know it was great for me. We have some comments in the chat. If you have a chance to bring it up, people are thanking you for finding it very interesting. Thanking the presenters for your time and experience. And then, yeah, just for you guys sharing your experiences. I think it's really valuable for everyone on the line to hear. And it was really nice having both of you share your experiences. I know from my end, I enjoyed it. So I hope you guys did as well.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. It was great. And yeah, it's been kind of a crazy time. So it was nice to go back and remember some of what it was like, and yeah, and share that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I will. I'm going to stop the recording there. But if anyone does want to ask a quick last question,